What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Eclectic Beard. So this go round, we'll be looking at why Europe doesn't build skyscrapers. It's interesting. I did not realize I thought the big cities were kind of like some of our big cities. Tall buildings and stuff. Like really tall buildings and stuff. But apparently not. So let's see why.
These are what the major cities in Asia look like, from Shanghai, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Tokyo, and many other cities have similar skylines
Okay, I didn't think like y'all cities look like that many skyscrapers, but
and urban planning. These are what the major cities in the Middle East look like. Dubai, Doha, Kuwait, and others have forests of skyscrapers. These are what the major cities in North America look like. Again, towering skyscrapers in New York, Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, Mexico City, and so on. Interestingly, if we go to Europe, in comparison with major Asian, Middle Eastern, North American cities, Europe,
yeah, that's a stark difference.
especially the western part, doesn't like to build or to be known for skyscrapers. Well, a skyscraper is defined as a multi-story building at least 100 meters tall. Sometimes, depending on who you ask, it can be 150 meters, but for the sake of this video, let's just say 100. In the list of 100 cities in the world with the most skyscrapers, only 5 European cities, Moscow, Istanbul, London, Frankfurt, and Paris, made the list. Moscow, being top in Europe, is not even in top 15 globally. 8 out of 10 highest buildings in the European continent are flocked in Russia. Most of them are in Moscow. The second with the most skyscrapers is Istanbul. Skyscrapers are known as a proxy for economic power and visual financial muscle of the country. Well, Moscow and Istanbul are not exactly part of the economic powerhouse of the European continent. For example, London is considered as the financial capital of Europe, and is arguably sometimes referred as the financial capital of the world.
And it doesn't even look like there's that many tall buildings there.
Even the city of Honolulu on the island of Hawaii has more skyscrapers than London. Let's dissect the question why one of the wealthy, if not the wealthiest continent, Europe, doesn't like to build skyscrapers. Historically, most European cities were founded in the Middle Ages, some of them thousands of years ago, and the churches were the highest and most important buildings of all, signifying the heritage and culture. The scale of skyscrapers would often strongly influence and disturb the perception of historic cities just because, obviously, they dominate the skyline and overall view of the cities. In 1940, even the fascist government of Italy was worried that Italy's churches and monuments could be destroyed by bombings and invasion. So they started to reinforce building walls around them. And this is how Santa Croce Church in Lecce was fortified. Not only churches are important in Europe, but also other historical buildings and their often subtle relationship to each other and to the landscape, hills, and lakes. Generally, there are a lot of people in European cities who live in houses and apartments.
I can understand the religious aspect from, the mindset of 40, 50, 60 years ago. Granted, there's still people that place value on the religious aspect of things, and the church being the tallest and all that good stuff. I could see some people still having that mindset, but going by recent polls, and this is true here in the U.S. as well, that it's just religion doesn't play as big of a part. So at some point in time, there has to be a cutoff from where the religious thing, but the historical, and I understand, it makes sense, total sense from the historical standpoint, regardless of where you stand religiously, just due to the fact of a lot of the buildings outside of just the churches are old. But I find it funny that they took and showed how Italy, during the time of Mussolini, took and, let's take and beef this up a little bit in case we get bombed, in case we get bombed and things like that. Take and, preserve its historical heritage. But that shows you the influence that the historical has on building and stuff like that, which is cool to see, because you see in the Middle East, like 1,000-year-old stuff has been destroyed by the likes of ISIS. So or a different Muslim sect than who was there in the first place, whether it be Al Qaeda coming in and destroying some stuff, or whether it be ISIS, and that's happened. So, interesting.
That are older than the United States of America. So cities like London and Paris have fairly strict laws on the height of the buildings in order to protect the aesthetic of the cities. For example, London has no less than 50,000 protected buildings and counting, rising each year with automatic age listing, and the impact constructing a tall building right next to them would have on the locality that would easily ignite the local, not in my backyard movement. Additionally, in London, you have something called a protected view. There are 14 protected views in total, and they include the need to be able to see St. Paul's Cathedral from as far away as Alexandria Palace. Other protected views focus on the Palace of Westminster, Buckingham, and so on. London is traversed by no less than 14 huge viewing corridors to famous viewpoints, often to the city's 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, 5 cathedrals, 6 palaces, and 3 castles. The result is that there is a complex, 3-dimensional grid above central London, through which architects must not build. But the architects of the financial skyscrapers in the city of London have risen to the challenge and came up with some impressive workarounds. The Leadenhall building, for example, has a distinctive cheese grater shape which actually allows to lean out of the way of one of the protected views. But this disdain to skyscrapers, especially in London, has a drawback and creates a huge paradox and a problem. The UK has a policy for metropolitan areas called a green belt. The green belt is intended to prevent urban sprawl and protect towns and villages merging to each other and losing their identity. This sounds great, but in the long shot, as the population keeps growing, more and more people get crammed into a small place. Rent prices will go through the roof, and for average middle-class family, apartments get tinier and tinier, and eventually it will become a literal shoebox. So this is one of the reasons why London has the most expensive rental accommodation in Europe, followed by Zurich, Moscow, and Geneva, according to the accommodation ranking report by ECA International.
But I can kind of understand the reason why they would set something like that up. I mean, as much as people want to move there, you've got to protect the integrity of not only the infrastructure, but also the historical beauty that's within the city limits. I mean, it's just, that makes a ton of sense why they've done that. Granted, developers are going to take and put stuff where they can. Any open space or, anything that can be, that's one size can be split in half and made smaller and everything doubled so you can double your rent and stuff like that. But that's, that's just the way it is whenever, you've got big cities. And what's interesting is the fact that it showed a couple of the taller buildings that are modern there in London, and the shapes of all of them seem to take and do this number at some point, if not this. So having to, trying to build something where you can keep sight lines and you're not disturbing the peace, like that's one of the few things where I think building architects or building engineers are a little bit better than maybe job site engineers. Maybe that's just me, because I get aggravated with engineers in general on job sites, because they seem to make life harder for no apparent reason, or at least no reason that the workman can see. That they unnecessarily seem to drag out how long a job takes because of the changes. But I digress. It's interesting because the way they've come up with keeping sight lines and stuff like that's pretty cool to see, even in that little short snippet, just with the shape of
The only way for London is to go up to build skyscrapers. This way, nice and spacious apartments become affordable. So keeping the visual impression of London and the view of its cultural sites has a huge downside for Londoners and expats. Interestingly, in Paris, there are even stricter laws. Tall towers are all but banned within the city, which allows features like the Eiffel Tower and Les Invalides to stand out in the cityscape. The one proper skyscraper within the city is Tour Montparnasse Tower, and it's almost universally hated and is generally considered an eyesore. Parisians
say this, I mean, looking at it from different angles, and especially where it's at in relation to the Eiffel Tower, I mean, with the one shot, you can see the Eiffel Tower, and then that off to the side, and it's just like, oh no, that looks, that just, it doesn't, it looks, it sticks out like a sore thumb beside the Eiffel Tower. But now, even from this view, you got the other tall buildings in the background. Like, it gives the actual photo some depth, because you've got the Eiffel Tower and then all of those other buildings in back, but you've got this one piece right here off to the left-hand side that's just like, here I is. Whoever designed something to take and go right there should be, they should spend the rest of their life in prison, because that just, oh, that's an eyesore. That is absolutely ugly. Ugh.
And say the best view of Paris is from the top of the Tour Montparnasse, because it's the only place in Paris that you can see the Tour Montparnasse. Parisians quickly realized that skyscrapers were spoiling the spirit of their city, and they imposed strict zoning regulations that did not allow any buildings over 37 meters tall to be built. This is to preserve the character of the city, and was enacted shortly after the Tour Montparnasse was built in 1977, which is 210 meters tall. The area of La Défense, which is outside of the Paris city limits, is the location of Paris's financial district, and does have its fair share of skyscrapers, but it's considered far enough away not to ruin the view of.
Yeah, you see that view, and it's like, okay, it makes sense. Like, looks like the cityscape from right there. It's just, oh, that's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It makes sense for them to take and do what they did with the big buildings being in the financial district. Like, oh my God, that's absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Of Paris. London has something similar to a secondary financial district in the Canary Wharf area, but unlike London, the government of France has allowed urban sprawl around the city, and rent prices are relatively cheaper than London, despite Paris being considered as the most expensive city to live in. Now let's look at why Europeans hate skyscrapers, even though it makes life much easier. This distinction.
Bro. Look at here. You're talking about it makes life easier. Alright, look. I can understand skyscraper and the modern need for them, because you're wanting to take and build up, and you're it saves space on one hand, because you can build them really tall and you can pack a lot of people in them. Alright, and you can actually pack in different businesses and stuff, of ground level and different floors for offices and stuff like that, interspersed in between where residential space is. Okay, completely understand it. However, when you put it in a historical city, it muddies up the place. You've got all these beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous, architecture that's been there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 or longer, years long or longer. Well, a lot of stuff is 12, 13, 14, 15, 1600s. A lot of it's come from the Renaissance and stuff like that, which is 1400s, 1500s. But it goes against, it's such a juxtaposition that it's, yeah, no, I can understand the reason why so many people and cities are like, nah, we don't, put it over here. Like, put it over here. It's still within the city limits, but it's over here, and all of our historical landmarks are preserved. It doesn't take up the view from this. It's not such a hardcore juxtaposition. Like, there's no,
For skyscrapers in Europeans began in 1960s, when Brussels was hosting Expo. Expo is a huge event, so the Belgian government was demolishing huge blocks of historical buildings in order to give land to skyscrapers to be built, disregarding historical sites and buildings. And this has been termed as Brusselization. This label doesn't solely apply to Brussels, rather it can denote any place where uncontrolled growth emerged from lack of zoning regulations and laissez-faire approach to urban development. But in some cases like Berlin, the situation is different. The reason may be the lack of firm ground. For example, New York City stands on a firm granite, which doesn't let the city to sink. But in Berlin, the entire city is built on muddy ground that reaches...
It would seem like New York City is sitting on, I don't know, some imported land material. You know, taking and making the island just a little bit bigger as it goes, because it's in between rivers. So, but I will say this: there's a lot of. We went to Massachusetts, and Massachusetts was like all hills and like granite, like every bit of it. So, I could see there being it being on granite, but man, it's a funny spot for it with all them rivers and stuff that they're right by.
Is up to 18 meters deep. All high-rise buildings are kind of a floating vessel. Carving through the muddy ground and building the foundation first is a very expensive challenge that urban sprawling is much cheaper for Berlin. At this point, you might be thinking about Shanghai, which was built on a muddy ground too, but filled with skyscrapers. It's been now decades that Shanghai is sinking, and currently 30% of its subsidence can be attributed to skyscrapers. China decided to go ahead anyway because the main justification for it in Shanghai could be that the population density is such that land prices skyrocket and make it too attractive to build, overcoming planning objections. Another, probably the biggest reason why there are no skyscrapers in Europe, zoning regulations are advertised as something good, preserving the culture, heritage and all that jazz, but often it goes down to cronyism. There are the cronies who benefit from zoning regulations and lobby for them. If skyscrapers are allowed, there will be far more apartment and office.
See, this is somebody who is for all the skyscrapers. Look, shut up. Shut up. Yes, it would take and allow more people, but I'm sure the people that live in these places don't want to mess up the historical viewpoints and aspects of their city. Shut up.
Spaces available, which in turn will push down the cost of rent. Because there is more supply, it will depress the value of the...
As soon as a skyscraper would be built, it'd be filled, and you'd have the same problem. But now there's more people, there's more citizens, so now it's technically a bigger city because you've allowed a few skyscrapers. There's amenities and everything else like that that'll be taken and built into all of them, and possibly, a new. So it's already historical. You build in the skyscrapers, you add to the citizenry of this place. You're not going to drive rent prices down. It would not.
Existing properties. As we have talked in the previous videos how the US doesn't build high-speed rail and how lobbyists go against it, it may be the same exact thing in Europe, but it's about skyscrapers. If you want to learn about it more, here is the video. And what do you think, should Europeans go ahead with skyscrapers to lower the rents, or it should stay as it is? And if you are European, what is your personal opinion about skyscrapers in your city? Let me know your...
All right, look at here. All right, look at here. And I could be wrong. It could lower prices. Like, it could lower rent prices, but I'm not seeing it for some of the... I don't see rent prices in London going down with the advent of more skyscrapers. It's more space, yes, that will be immediately filled. Okay. It'll take and add to, number one, it'll be a modernizing feature in a place that's got historical value. So what you're going to do is you're going to take and throw this modern building into the historical place that's already got all these landmarks and stuff like that. People are going to want to rent it out quick. You're not going to do anything to the rent prices. If anything, with more space like that, and due to the fact that it's modern, the rent prices in these places would be higher than the surrounding area. So I understand the reason why Europe doesn't like skyscrapers. It makes complete sense. Like a place, like it showed for London where the skyscrapers were. Awesome. awesome because other than the one building, it didn't take away from the beauty that you see of Paris. Like, absolutely gorgeous. There's so much history in Europe that, yeah, I wouldn't want skyscrapers built in abundance in a place like Paris or Berlin or anywhere else either. I just wouldn't. So, this is an interesting video. I think this person kind of, I don't know, they're a little bit too in favor of skyscrapers, and I don't think they're taking into account the fact that you take and put something modern in a historical place, and you're not exactly going to lower the rent because it's more places for people to live. No. It's going to be seen as modern amenities within a historical place, and so it's going to allow people to charge more rent, which means the people around the building would be able to take and up their rent. So it's not really going to do anything. Hope y'all enjoyed this. This was interesting to me, kind of. So, just for the simple fact of the person's outlook and everything. But yeah, y'all be good to each other. Love yourselves.